Good evening. Now, before I start, I just want to give a warning that the content of this might be a bit distressing to some viewers and listeners. Should the Pakistani rape gang scandal actually be called the Islamic rape gang scandal? According to a new report conducted by an expert on Islamic studies, well, it sets out several key aspects of the Islamic faith that he claims explains the phenomenon of groups of some Muslim men raping mostly white girls, some of which may well obviously be disputed by Muslim groups. But these are the doctrine of the superiority of Muslims over non-Muslims, the doctrine of loyalty and disavowal, also known as love and hate for the sake of God, the superiority and dominance of men over women, the mandated seclusion of women by men, the religious practice of forced marriage and the lack of a concept of an age of consent, the perceived threat of dangerous female sexuality, the practice of sex slavery as an aspect of the laws of jihad, and dhimitude and the treatment of conquered non-Muslim peoples in Islamic laws. Now, this report claims that while Pakistani men are overrepresented in the grooming gang convictions, the overall proportion of Muslim perpetrators is even greater. And this is backed up by powerful, extremely distressing testimony from a rape gang survivor, Ella Hall, which is not a real name. She testifies that her abuse was racially and religiously aggravated. She was raped because of her race and religion, and her rapist told her while she was being raped that this was happening because she was white and because she was a Christian. And during rapes, she was verbally abused for being a non-Muslim. Now, I'm going to read to you now a little bit of Ella Hill's testimony. This was provided to the J inquiry in 2019. Now, again, this might be a bit distressing to viewers and listeners. She says, "I was told that to show them respect, I mustn't eat pork. I was told that Muslim girls are good and pure and they stay virgins until marriage, but all white girls are slags and they all sleep with hundreds of people. I was told white girls are trash, they're all whores, they are lower than feces under your shoe, they don't obey Allah, so they deserve to be punished, they don't dress modestly. Muslim women are pure because they cover down to their ankles and down to their wrists, and the hem of their top comes down below their knees. White girls show the curves of their body, so they are asking for it. They should be raped as punishment for not obeying Allah. Sex with a kafir, which is a non-believer girl, doesn't count as adultery. They believed they had a position of religious moral superiority over non-believers. They believed it was their duty to punish us, as they believed that doing so made them good Muslims. This is what they were taught by their mothers. I was told that in Islam, if a girl or woman looks at a man who isn't her brother, father, or her husband, then that means she wants to have sex with them. So I was told to look at the floor when I was around Muslim men. So when I did look at a waiter in a restaurant, I was then taken away to be gang raped as punishment. I was told that according to their faith community, girls are old enough for sex when they start their periods at age 11. All of the sexual abuse that I experienced was linked to spiritual abuse or religious abuse. Religious scriptures were used as tools of control to force me to conform to their will." The report goes on to paint an apparent pattern of sexual abuse perpetrated by some men of the Muslim faith. For example, in 2021, the BBC actually reported that as many as 1,000 non-Muslim girls, so Christians, Hindus and Sikhs, are abducted each year in Pakistan and forced to convert to Islam and then marry their abductors. The concern here, of course, is that if they can be justified by aspects of the religion of Islam in Pakistan, then is that something that some people of Pakistani heritage might bring with them here to the UK? There's also marriage trafficking. In 2009, Home Office statistics reported that 90% of victims of forced marriage in the UK were Muslims. They were, in many cases, taken to Muslim countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, and Afghanistan. Now, the report outlines several recommendations about how to deal with the issue here in Britain. They say, fears of stoking Islamophobia should not be allowed to scuttle transparent investigation of the grooming gang's religious cultures. The religious identities of both perpetrators and victims should be rigorously recorded. Police should be trained to interview grooming gang suspects concerning their religious beliefs. Police should also be trained to investigate the religious aspects of the testimony of the victims. The state should enforce a legal prohibition of unregistered Sharia marriages. The role of abusers' family members in enabling abuses must be considered. That is a very important factor, I think. Islamic religious leaders should be called upon to disavow the activities of grooming gangs, as well as certain religious beliefs which have enabled grooming gang activities. Politicians should refrain from making dismissive but ignorant claims concerning what Islam does and doesn't teach about human sexual relations. It must be publicly acknowledged that there are Muslims who reject the key elements of the grooming gang cultures as well. Now, the UK Forced Marriage Unit should remove statements on its website that there is no religious basis to forced marriages in Islam. Awareness training should be provided to vulnerable white working class communities who are being targeted by grooming gangs. For example, the Sikh community already have programmes which could be used as a model. Now, of course, some Muslims have condemned the rape gang scandal and reject claims that their faith could be used to justify this criminal and abhorrent behaviour. But based on the findings of this report, I wonder whether it is time to have a serious conversation about whether or not it is actually a small number of people's interpretation of the religion of Islam that is primarily responsible for the widespread rape and sexual abuse of predominantly white working class girls.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind. The more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Now, before I go to my panel, I'm joined now by teacher and Labour Party activist Aisha Ali Khan. Aisha, thank you very much. So I get this is an incredibly difficult topic to talk about on multiple different fronts. This report was published today, and in it does identify several aspects that it says are prominent features of the religion of Islam. For example, the dominance of men over women. Would you like to come back to that?
Well, of course. I mean, everything you've just read out, deeply distressing, absolutely disgusting. And it's something that I've spent the last 25 years of my life campaigning about. I myself grew up in Keighley. You've mentioned the town many times. We had the amazing Anne Cryer who tried to raise awareness back in the early 90s, and she was completely shut down. And many of my friends were groomed in front of me. I saw them. And when I became an adult, realized it was still happening. This is what I've been doing for years now, talking about it and trying to raise awareness. These men, these monsters, these predators, using Islam to justify their sick behaviour, their disgusting behaviour, it's just abhorrent. And what makes me upset is this idea that they only targeted white girls. They targeted everyone, any woman, any girl that they could get away with raping and sexually assaulting and abusing, they targeted. What breaks my heart is the testimony you've read out, this idea that white girls were abused and it was justified because Islam told them to do it is absolutely rubbish. I mean, I'm trying not to swear here. It's really hard not to, because these are the sort of men who will use any means to justify their sick perversions. And
just on that, sorry, because there is the doctrine of superiority of Muslims over non-Muslims. I mean, is that accurate? Is that fair to say that in Islam there is deemed to be superiority over non-Muslims, and presumably you could see how that could be used there to see that working class white girls are lesser than?
This is so bizarre for me, because I grew up in a very open, understanding environment. My parents are very, very, from now, when I look back and I think, gosh, we would have Sikh sort of literature and songs on in the morning. My parents really friendly with the Shia neighbours. We had Jewish neighbours. I myself am very close to many Jewish people, Israeli people as well. So my point is this: the people that try to justify, that use Islam to justify the idea that they are better and they're entitled to do this and they can get away with it, these are sick individuals who've clearly never heard the word no from day one, and that's something that I've spoken about. And people like Nazir Afzal has mentioned this. He's done articles, and by the way, he was one of the first people to realise, hang on, this criminal behaviour is criminal behaviour. Why aren't the CPS doing something about it? And Patrick, so many times I've gone and done talks and I've organised events, and police officers were openly coming up to me, social workers were openly coming up to me 10, 15, 20 years ago and saying, I'm so glad you've said this, because we couldn't say this because we would have been deemed, it would have been deemed racist and inappropriate, but thank you so much for saying it, because this
I do wonder, actually, sorry, Bose, because we're going to have to get to my panel shortly, but I do wonder if that's also part of the problem, because in some of the recommendations there, it did say the people firstly don't need to be afraid of being called Islamophobic. The other aspect is that it needs to be examined, the role that family members played. So, for example, the wives of some of the perpetrators and their family in apparently at some times maybe turning a blind eye to this, and calls for more Islamic leaders to actually openly come out and condemn it, which I know you absolutely vehemently call for, and you obviously absolutely condemn as well. So look, thank you for that. I appreciate your time this evening. So I'm Charlie Khan there. We are going to whiz ourselves over to my panel on this now. We've got Director of Public Services Mark Littlewood. We've also got landlord and activist Adam Brooks and journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Right, Mark, I'll start with you. Lots to unpack here, but what that report does outline there is several key aspects of the religion of Islam that appear to be used, backed up by victim testimony, to apparently justify the industrial-scale rape of white girls.
Yep. And if we ever get anything approaching a proper national inquiry, I think it should be no can of worms left unopened, basically. We should investigate everything fully, including this. There should be no-go areas of that inquiry. The fact the inquiry still seems to be on ice is a disgrace, by the way. So we should investigate religion, we should investigate the communities, we should investigate all of the circumstances, familial, cultural, surrounding it. We got ourselves partly into this problem because we weren't willing to turn over some stones previously, right? I mean, I'm not saying we could have nipped this in the bud, but the number of girls abused would have been considerably lower had we actually had the guts to confront this at an earlier stage rather than covering it up. The one thing I would say, and this is complex, is this a religious doctrinal problem or is it a cultural problem? By way of analogy, they're not similar sort of problems, but we have much more violence in Britain associated with, say, the sport of football than the sport of cricket. Is that a problem about football? Or is that a problem about the culture surrounding football? And those are two different things. Let's be honest, a devout Christian could commit some pretty gruesome crimes based on wording in the Bible and rely on that. I
do get that. What they're identifying there is a pattern, not just here, but also abroad, in Muslim countries, which that report identifies there. We speak a lot about, first it was kind of like the Asian grooming gangs, that was too broad. Then it became a lot about, what's the Pakistani grooming gangs. OK, well, a lot of them are Pakistani, so there's that. But now, specifically, to drill down on whether or not actually this is a problem with the interpretation of Islam.
Right, so for me, this is a race, a class, and an extreme interpretation of their religion issue. I've got a good friend that is a Muslim. He has the beard. He takes his faith very, very seriously. And I've spoke to him about this, and he said there is a small minority of people that will use their religion as a cloak to get away with what they want to get away with. And it's easy to say, oh, the book told me to do that. Now, you know, he's a family man. He's disgusted with this. Let's remember we've had priests that have committed horrible sex crimes as well. There are nasty people within all religions. But this was allowed to fester and allowed to continue because people were scared to call out not just the race issue, but the religious issue. People were scared. My friend, when I said, why didn't many of the communities speak out? He said, because of these small amount of extremists that are very violent. And he said as well, communities didn't want to speak out because then it put a whole magnifying glass on all Muslims. And obviously, the majority of Muslims are against the rape of children. So,
I mean, Nina, I read out one of the survivors' testimonies there. There are several others as well where they say very, very similar things, including things like during rapes, they were having scriptures from the Quran recited to them and all of this. Yeah, is that an aspect of this that people have been unwilling to discuss, which is how an interpretation of the religion of Islam has basically justified, for some people, obviously sick people, the rape of white working class girls?
It's all very distressing, and of course these are crimes of men perpetrated on women. Let's say that's the basic thing. Your guest, Aisha, said that they were being used as an excuse. So I don't think you can blame the religion. It's a human crime. You can blame the men. And as Adam pointed out, there are other religions that have, you know. So, but the thing is, knowing it, what good does it do you? For instance, is it any good to know that there are more Catholics, priests, sexually abusing choir boys than there are Church of England vicars?
Well, I suppose it allows you to it would allow you to potentially address it, and this is the thing. So, if we hear a lot about Islamophobia in Britain, and that we're going to get some kind of Islamophobia definition, etc. But what we don't hear about, as much as I would like, actually, is whether or not specifically large numbers of these predominantly working class white girls were raped and abused in what was essentially a racist and, according to this report anyway, could be considered a religiously motivated attack.
Yeah, well, I think that has to be investigated. And to Nina's point, we shouldn't worry about the data. If you did know that there was a lot more sexual abuse in one church or one religion compared to another, that would inform how you policed, how you investigated,
I understand that,
what steps you put in place, right?
But what steps? OK, supposing...
So it calls for certain recommendations, Nina.
So
one of them, it says, is that more Muslim religious leaders should call this stuff out publicly. So that's one of them. The other aspect of it is people in their own communities and in their own homes, and it calls for an examination of the roles of family members. Now, I have been very surprised, I know other people have been very surprised, that a lot of these paedophiles who've served their time in prison have been allowed back in the family home and allowed to live in their community again. There are a catalogue of cases where, and again, there's been cases recently where white British people who have been guilty of paedophilia have come out of prison and they've basically been turfed out of their local area.
Good.
And I'm not saying this never happens in the Muslim community at all, but it's obviously been concerns as to, and as this report alleges or says, why is there maybe not a bit more of that? These are things that we can examine.
I agree that, but those recommendations were made, and they should be carried out and fulfilled. But the thing is, let's just not forget that the majority of sex crimes against children, gang rape, are perpetrated by white people, and we do not see headlines that say...
But they're not systematically covered up, Nina, like
most gang rape perpetrators are Christian. We don't see that.
No, but when there have been religious aspects to it, for example, like the Catholic scandal or the Church of England scandal, then there have been very specific headlines about that which have involved religion.
I agree.
And I think we've got to say that a lot of these people that are coming across are from remote villages in places like Pakistan, where they haven't seen blonde girls, they haven't seen schoolgirls in short skirts. So it's a massive cultural difference.
Exactly. That is another thing that report says. Again, if you have a culture there in certain parts of Pakistan, as the report says, where you will have the kidnap and then enforced marriage and enslavement of non-Muslim girls, is it reasonable, or is it a question to ask about whether or not some of that attitude might be brought to the UK if some of those people come to the UK? But